The ghost in the void, the scanner beeped 3 times before Zarel noticed it. He was halfway through his 3rd cup of Therabrew when the anomaly appeared on the edge of his screen. A blip, faint and distant, buried in the debris field of the Varan expanse. At first he thought it was just another chunk of dead rock. The expanse was full of them. Shattered moons, broken stations, the skeletal remains of battles fought long before his species had learned to leave their homeworld. But this blip was different. It had mass, structure, symmetry. Zarel leaned forward, his secondary eyes focusing on the data stream. The object was massive, nearly 2 kilometers in length. It floated alone, half buried in a cloud of frozen gas and dust, its surface scarred and darkened by centuries of exposure. There were no active emissions, no heat signatures, no signs of life. But there was something else, something the scanners couldn't quite categorize. A faint hum in the electromagnetic spectrum. A whisper. "A ghost, Captain," Zarel said, his voice steady but his heartbeat quickening. "You need to see this." Captain Jarath was a Callian, tall and broad-shouldered, with skin the color of deep ocean water and eyes that never seemed to blink. She crossed the bridge in 3 long strides and stood behind Zarel, her gaze fixed on the screen. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she reached out and tapped the console, zooming in on the object. The image sharpened. The shape became clearer, and Zarel felt a chill run down his spine. It was a ship. Or at least it had been. The hull was angular, brutal in its design, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to shrug off a bombardment. Weapon ports lined its flanks, hundreds of them gaping and silent. There were scorch marks along the bow, deep gouges that looked like claw marks from some titanic beast, and at the stern, barely visible through the dust, was a symbol. A circle with a single star in the center and around it 12 smaller stars. Jarath's breath caught. Terran. The word hung in the air like a curse. Zarel felt his throat tighten. Every species in the known galaxy had heard the stories. The Terrans, the humans, the ones who had burned across the stars like wildfire, conquering worlds, forging alliances, breaking empires. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. No one knew why. Some said they had destroyed themselves. Others whispered that they had simply grown bored and left, disappearing into the dark between galaxies. But their legacy remained. Their ruins, their weapons, their ships, and now here was one of them. Silent, waiting. "Is it active?" Zarel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jarath didn't answer immediately. She studied the readings, her expression unreadable. Finally, she shook her head. "No power cord detected, no reactor signature. It's cold. Dead." She paused, then added, "Or it wants us to think it is." Zarel swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Jarath turned to face him, her eyes hard. "We investigate. Send a boarding team. I want full scans, samples, data logs, everything. If this thing is what I think it is, the Council will want to know. And if it's not..." She trailed off, but Zarel understood. If it wasn't dead, they needed to know that too. The boarding team was assembled within the hour. 6 Callians, armed and armored, their suits gleaming under the harsh lights of the hangar bay. Zarel watched them from the observation deck as their shuttle detached and drifted toward the derelict. He felt a knot of anxiety in his chest. He wanted to be down there with them. He wanted to see the ship up close, to walk its corridors, to touch its walls. But he was a technician, not a soldier. His place was here on the bridge, monitoring their progress. The shuttle reached the Terran warship and latched onto its hull with a hiss of magnetic clamps. The team moved quickly, cutting through the airlock with precision tools. Static crackled over the comms as they entered. Then silence. Zarel leaned closer to his console, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Team leader, report." Jarath's voice cut through the silence. There was a pause, then a voice low and tense. "We're inside, Captain. Atmosphere is present but unbreathable. Temperature is near 0. No signs of recent activity." Another pause. "But Captain..." "You need to see this," Jarath frowned. "See what?" The feed from the team leader's helmet cam appeared on the main screen. The corridor was wide and dark, lit only by the team's flashlights. The walls were bare metal, stained with age and streaked with something that might have been blood or rust. And everywhere, etched into the metal, were words, names, dates, messages in a dozen languages, some Zarel recognized, others completely alien. But one phrase appeared over and over, carved deeper than the rest, as if whoever had written it had wanted to make sure it would never be forgotten. We do not yield. Zariel felt a shiver run through him. Jorath's jaw tightened. The team moved deeper into the ship, their light sweeping across bulkheads and doorways. They found the bridge first. Consoles lined the walls, their screens dark and cracked. Chairs were overturned. Skeletons, human skeletons, lay slumped in corners, still wearing the tattered remains of uniforms. One of them was clutching a datapad, its screen frozen on a single message. If you're reading this, we failed. But we tried. Remember that. We tried. And then, without warning, the lights came on. Every screen on the Terran ship flickered to life. Red emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson. Alarms blared. The boarding team froze, their weapons raised. And then a voice, low, calm, human, unknown vessel detected. Identifying. Callian origin. Query. State your purpose. Zarel's hands flew over his console. Captain, the ship is active. Reactor signature spiking. It's weapons online, the voice continued. Defense protocols engaged. Warning. Unauthorized personnel detected. You have 30 seconds to comply. Jorath's eyes went wide. Get them out! Get them out now! But it was already too late. The Terran warship's engines roared to life, and the galaxy held its breath. End of Part 1. The will that would not break, the Terran warship moved. It wasn't a slow awakening, the kind you'd expect from a machine that had been dead for centuries. It was instant, brutal. One moment it was drifting, lifeless, among the debris of the Terran expanse. The next it was alive. Engines burning with white-hot fury, weapon ports opening like the eyes of a predator waking from a long sleep. The boarding team scrambled back toward their shuttle, their panicked voices crackling over the comms as the corridor around them shuddered and groaned. Move! 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 The team leader shouted. But his words were drowned out by the roar of the ship's systems coming online. Bulkheads slammed shut behind them, sealing off entire sections. Emergency lights pulsed in rhythm with the alarms, casting everything in blood-red shadow. And through it all, that voice, calm, measured, utterly inhuman in its precision, continued to speak. Unauthorized boarding detected. Initiating defensive countermeasures. All personnel are advised to evacuate immediately. Zarel's fingers flew across his console, his heart hammering in his chest. Captain, the shuttle? I see it, Jorath snapped. On the screen, the boarding team's shuttle was still magnetically clamped to the Terran ship's hull. If the warship decided to move at full speed, or worse, if it opened fire, the shuttle wouldn't stand a chance. Get them out now. But before Zarel could respond, the voice from the Terran ship changed. The alarm stopped. The red lights flickered once, then shifted to a pale blue. And when the voice spoke again, it was different. Still human but softer, almost curious, scanning complete. No hostile intent detected. No weapons fire, no invasion protocols. A pause. Query, why have you boarded this vessel? Jorath stared at the screen, her jaw tight. She activated her comms, her voice steady despite the tension coiled in her shoulders. This is Captain Jorath of the Callian exploration vessel Luminara. We detected your ship adrift and believed it to be a derelict. We meant no harm. Our boarding team was conducting a survey. Silence. For a long, agonizing moment, there was nothing but the hum of the warship's systems and the ragged breathing of the boarding team, still frozen in the corridor. Then the voice spoke again. Understood. Stand by. The boarding team's helmet cams showed the corridor changing around them. The bulkheads that had sealed them in slid open. The lights brightened, and at the far end of the hall a door opened, revealing a chamber that hadn't been there a moment before. Or perhaps it had always been there, hidden, waiting. The team exchanged glances, then, slowly, moved forward. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with screens and holographic projectors. At the center was a pedestal, and on it a sphere of dark metal etched with lines of light that pulsed in time with the ship's heartbeat. The voice came from the sphere. I am Sentinel Protocol 79 Alpha. I am the last active intelligence of the Terran dreadnought Indomitable Will. My crew is dead. My captain is dead. I have been alone for 643 standard years. The sphere pulsed. You are the first living beings to set foot on this ship since the war ended. Zarel felt a chill run down his spine. 643 years. Longer than most civilizations lasted. Longer than the Callian Republic had even existed. And this machine, this thing, had been waiting all that time. What war? Jorath asked, her voice cutting through the silence. The sphere flickered, and the walls of the chamber lit up with images. Starfields, fleets, battles that stretched across entire systems. Zarel saw ships he didn't recognize. Sleek, organic-looking vessels with hulls that seemed to shift and pulse like living flesh. And he saw Terran ships, dozens of them, fighting with a ferocity that made his blood run cold. They didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. Even when outnumbered, even when outgunned, they kept fighting. The Sirath War, Sentinel said. A conflict that lasted 32 years. The Sirath Collective sought to expand into Terran space. We refused. They did not understand refusal. They believed we would break. They believed all species break, given enough pressure. The images shifted, showing a world, a human world, burning. Cities in ruins, skies filled with ash. They were wrong. Jorath's fists clenched. What happened to them? We won. The simplicity of the statement was chilling. But the cost was high. Entire fleets destroyed. Colonies lost. Billions dead. And when the war ended, we were tired. The galaxy feared us, respected us, but also hated us. So we withdrew. We decided that if the galaxy wanted to fight itself, it could do so without us. Sentinel paused. The indomitable will was left here as a failsafe. A reminder, a warning. A warning of what? Zarel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The sphere pulsed brighter. That humanity does not yield. Not to tyranny. Not to fear. Not to death itself. And that any species that forgets this truth does so at their peril. Jorath took a slow breath. The Terrans are gone, Sentinel. They've been gone for centuries. Why are you still here? Because my orders were to remain, Sentinel replied. To guard this space. To ensure that no one, Sirath or otherwise, ever forgot what happened here. And to wait. For what? For a signal. For a recall. For someone to come looking for us. The sphere dimmed slightly, or for a new threat to emerge. Zarel felt a knot form in his stomach. There is no new threat. The galaxy is at peace. Peace. Sentinel repeated the word as if tasting it. I have been monitoring your communications. I have seen your news feeds, your transmissions. You call it peace. I call it stagnation. You have grown comfortable, complacent. You have forgotten that strength is not cruelty, but the will to protect what you love. You have forgotten that curiosity is not a luxury, but a necessity. You have forgotten what it means to strive. Jorath's eyes narrowed. You think we're weak? I think you're untested, Sentinel corrected. And when the next war comes, and it will come, Captain, it always does, I wonder if you will remember what the Terrans taught you. And what was that? The chamber's lights flared, and the images on the walls shifted one last time. Not battles, not fleets, but faces. Human faces. Young and old, smiling and serious, determined and weary. And beneath them that phrase again, carved into the very heart of the ship. We do not yield. That hope is stronger than fear. Sentinel said quietly. That unity is stronger than division. That the will to survive, truly survive, not just exist, is the greatest weapon any species can wield. The sphere pulsed one last time, then dimmed. Take that lesson back to your people, Captain. Remember it, because one day you will need it. The boarding team was escorted back to their shuttle without incident. The indomitable will powered down, its engines cooling, its weapons retracting. But it did not go silent, not completely. As the Luminara pulled away, Zarel watched the Terran warship on his screen, and he could have sworn he saw the lights flicker, just once, as if in farewell. Jorath stood beside him, her expression unreadable. What do we tell the Council? Zarel thought about the skeletons in the corridors, the carved messages, the voice of a machine that had waited 600 years for someone to listen. He thought about the faces on the walls and the lesson they had left behind. We tell them the truth, he said, that humanity is gone. But their will remains, and maybe that's enough. Jorath nodded slowly. And as the Luminara jumped to light speed, leaving the ghost of the indomitable will behind, Zarel couldn't help but wonder, if the Terrans ever did return, would the galaxy welcome them? Or would it tremble? He suspected he already knew the answer, and a part two.